my name's Hannah and you're listening to the Brunel Let's Talk About It Mental Health and Wellbeing podcast with me as your host for the final time, but we'll talk about that a little bit later on. So today's episode is very special to me. It's an episode that I was very, very excited about shooting, mainly because the topic that we're going to be discussing today is something that I've also experienced. And, you know, it's something that I was saying before was with, you know, normally on this podcast, the frequent viewers will see that I normally interview staff members and doctors who are experts in the field of the topic that I'm discussing. But it's also very valuable to listen to firsthand experience, lived experiences. And yeah, I'm very excited about the guest I have today. So excited. We met at a lived experience session. So that's how as soon as I heard his story, I was like, oh my God, I really wish we could be on the podcast. My friend's like, you know, ask him. And he is here today. Do you mind please introducing yourself?
Yeah, my name's Pete. My background is Southeast London, born and bred. I now live quite far west of London. And I followed my father's path, who was national service and then in the police. But currently, I left that quite a few years ago now. I'm currently a consultant.
Okay, amazing. So, so as I was saying, today we're going to be talking about PTSD. I think maybe it will be helpful just for viewers who don't know what PTSD is. It's a mental health condition which is caused by a traumatic experience. And, you know, you sort of see it in shows and stuff, but we'll talk about that a little bit later on about how it's portrayed in the media. But it sort of have symptoms of flashbacks, nightmares, feeling very anxious, difficulty sleeping. But I think what's important about this is to sometimes hear people speak about their own experiences. You learn how these things can really range from person to person. I'm sure, Pete, for you, it was very different how you experienced PTSD and how I experienced PTSD, and how we went about sort of, you know, dealing with the emotions that came with things that we dealt with. Do you mind just telling me a little bit about your story and how you got to where you are today?
It's a very long story, I'm afraid, for your listeners. When I grew up, there was little choice in jobs, and I joined the Air Force just purely because there wasn't much choice in jobs out there. I spent 10 years in the military until I was 27. Didn't do a lot. It was a flying club, the RAF then. And I left there at 27 and got recruited. Funnily enough, I lived in Germany at the time. And the police came out and recruited ex-servicemen from there. And I joined the transport police in 1994 as a young officer, and they put me in a place called King's Cross. Spent 9 years there working on sort of core duties. Did a bit of time with car crime and did a bit of time. Big problems at King's Cross in those days of drugs and prostitution and street drinking. Yeah. Huge problems. Very, very confrontational. Lots of, in those days, we had quite a few large train crashes. I went to 5, never first at scene at these train crashes. I went to 5, and one in particular stands out for many of us because lots of people died at that one. And we dealt with a lot of suicides and accidental deaths, ranging from and I do apologise if this triggers you. People hanging. Yeah. People who have, my first one was a guy who unfortunately touched the overhead wires. And, you know, it's not very good when it's 25,000 volts. Died reasonably quickly, and I had to search him. Quite a few heavily disrupted bodies, because being transport police, we dealt with a lot of people who jumped or fell in front of trains. So highly disrupted bodies. Sort of what you expect, really. Train crashes, 5 of those, ranging from Watford in 1996 through Hatfield, Potter's Bar, which was very interesting. But the big one was Ladbroke Grove, I think in 2000, Ladbroke Grove. 31 people died at that one. And that's, I think, looking back, was where I first sort of started experiencing some issues that I was in denial about. Moving on, I'm very unlucky. I went to an attempted bombing in 19th of July 2000, which was Irish dissidents who planted a bomb in Ealing West London.
Yeah.
Failed to go off, luckily for us, because we were quite close to it. That was very exciting and interesting. Then I managed to get seconded away and became very specialist into something called CBRN, chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear, because we were starting to teach the police how to deal with those issues then in its early days. And then the Madrid bomb happened in 2004, killed 193 people, 13 bombs, really horrific attack. And the British government, for a change, were straight on it, that threat, and they decided to build up the bomb threat response for especially London, but the UK. Pumped money into a unit called the Specialist Response Unit in London, and I was asked to be a sergeant on that. That was a month before the horrific attacks on the 7th of July, 2005, which was the second bit of my story that really affected me. The next 2 years was chaos. We had a second attempted suicide bombing. The first one was a suicide bombing that went off and killed 52 people. This one, only the initiators exploded and nobody died. I was 40 seconds away from that one. I'm very unlucky. 3 bombs. There's not many people that can say that. Started experiencing issues after that, but again, I didn't know. Went into denial. Managed to get another secondment away to put me in a nice hotel teaching people stuff. So again, I could hide away. Came to a conclusion in 2015 where I had a bit of an argument at work and went sick out of frustration. And the doctor, my great doctor, picked up on the issues. I was still in denial. I refused. I refused to deal with that. But unfortunately, she threatened me, and I ended up going through the mental health system. And yeah, here I am today. That was 9 years ago. Here I am today, virtually through it, although suffering from massive anxiety. These things affect you for a long time.
I mean, between your experiences and when you went, because I know you said you were in denial for a while.
Yeah.
What made you go and finally sort of see that there was something wrong?
It's really weird because looking back, and it's really easy to look back, when I first joined the Transport Police, I went to King's Cross, and I first noticed that the officers there had a sort of manic look about them and a manic disposition. And I did say to someone, I think these are a bit mad, that you could see it in their eyes, there's something wrong. And a short while later, I found out that most of them had been a huge, horrific accident called the King's Cross Fire just a few years before, where 35 people died. And many of them were caught right up in that. They were responders. They went down below the fire and got trapped. So I should have seen it then.
Yeah. And
then when you're dealing with disrupted bodies, I found myself saying to people, I'm sure this will affect us one day.
Yeah.
I'm sure this will. I don't know how. Maybe it'll pigeonhole, which is a clue, or maybe it'll just come out when you're older. But I didn't realise that it was a slow dripping throughout the years. And then after Ladbroke Grove, so I explained Ladbroke Grove, 2 blades crashed coming out of Paddington, one coming into Paddington, one coming out. One coach caught a light and a load of people died in that, pretty unrecognisable. And a few people died outside that carriage being crushed in the accident. And I turned up hours after the event. And I was actually just running the cordon there, I think, at the time. They all mix into one, all of these 5 accidents. What was quite horrific about that one was in those days, so that was 2000, you had these mobile phones, these Nokia 3310s. You're all too young to remember these phones. But the batteries used to last forever. They lasted 5 or 6 days. And the phones were going off at scene for 5 days. And you can imagine now the parents and the loved ones of these victims desperately ringing. And everyone I speak to, even today, years and years later, will mention those phones. Really quite traumatic just to stand near. You really wanted to pick them up and you couldn't. And then about 5 days into it, as usual at these big accidents, they allowed the family to come up to the inner cordon area, which is the cordon surrounding what is treated as a crime scene. And they allowed them to place flowers and cards. And stupid me, I walked forward to look at the flowers and read the cards. And I got one right at the end, and it was from a young girl to her, I'm going to go now. It was from a young girl to her dad. And I forget what it said, but it was just heartbreaking. And the young girl who could hardly write.
Yeah.
And clearly she'd lost her dad. And I remember, first time ever, and since really, I broke down at the scene. And one of the older officers, the clever ones, big Welshman, came up to me and said, this is why I don't read the cards. And another one, bit of a tough guy, came over and gave me a cigar. So it was quite interesting to see these tough guys actually treating you, giving you that support. I found out after that, again, complete denial. The next 3 weeks, I described this to Dr. Joe Billings, who treated me. I went into like 3 weeks of like walking through treacle. I felt like my whole mind, I was walking through water for 3 weeks. And I've never heard anybody confirm that, except when I saw a guy being interviewed who wrote a BBC drama called The Responder. And he was an ex-cop, and he described walking through water, treacle. And I thought, yes.
As an experience. Like
as an experience, as a real weird sort of, I don't know, where your mind slows down. And I got angry at everything for those 3 weeks. If people come up to me on the street, I'd look for a way of escalating
I was the same,
Right.
Yeah.
Brilliant. It really does.
Yeah, no.
I'd looked for a reason to do it. And people got dealt with for disorderly behaviour. And I think I didn't help in that. I didn't bring it down. I wanted it to go up, you know. And then 3 weeks later, it just stopped. It just, overnight. And I went back to being, I don't think I was ever back to being the same old chatty old self. I went back to being someone with less tolerance. I think I started to develop a lack of tolerance. And I always put that down to, tolerance is an expendable resource, you know, because you start to make excuses for it.
Yeah.
Really weird. But I didn't think a lot of it, and I should have got help then.
Yeah. So then when you finally did, how did you feel? Or when you got the diagnosis, how did you feel?
Strangely, that was 10 years after 7/7.
Wow, yeah.
I was slowly going down for years and years after that. I mean, 7/7 really threw it. Completely going down. And secretly in the back of my head, I was thinking, I've got to get out. I'm going to go at 50. As soon as I get my pension, I'm going. I've got to go. I was so worried I'd end up getting done. I'd hitting someone. Or so angry I couldn't. But again, it's just all denial. When I went to the doctor, so I stormed out of work one day, sick. I had an argument. I stormed out of work. And I went to see Dr. Reader. God bless her. And she sat me down. And first of all, she got really, really angry at the way emergency services were treated. And they did try, I have to say, but they weren't that brilliant. And she said, you got to go to talking therapy. So I said, get out of here, doc. And I knew the doctor. She was a colleague of my partner, Helen. And she said, no, I'm not going to give you any time off unless you go and see talking therapies.
Yeah.
So I went to see talking therapy, still defensive. This is darkly funny. And the guy who interviewed me must have been used to dealing with other stuff. And he just sort of said to me, what trauma have you been through? And I said, well, I counted 20 fatalities, 5 train crashes, 3 bombs,
oh my God.
Constant aggression, you know, you name it.
Yeah.
And he straight away said, I can't deal with you. You've got to go straight to the mental health with all the servicemen from Afghanistan and Iraq, you know. And and so then I went there. I thought something's up here, clearly. Clearly something was up. I was going crazy. And I did the first they do a group session, and that group session was not more about you sitting there and going, hi, my name's Pete and I'm an alcoholic. It was actually about them teaching you what PTSD is.
Yeah.
So the limbic system, the amygdala, the hippocampus, and the way that we deal with memories not very well sometimes. And it just all fell into place then at the group session. And then having met, I went on to meet Dr. Joe Billings, and we went through a year of debriefing.
Did you do like some sort of EMDR therapy? Or
Well, I've tried that. I've tried that in Europe when I lived over there, but it was CBT.
Okay.
So with CBT, if you don't know this, they take you through very slowly your life, and mine was on 2 whiteboards, and they go through your life bit by bit, and you have to sort of relive it. You have to sit there and close your eyes and imagine you're there. Really mucks you up. I'm telling you now. I'll go into that, but you get this sort of timeline, and then the psychologist picks up on where you're most emotional. And there are things that I did, I haven't mentioned now, that should haunt me for life, and they never did.
Yeah.
There are bodies I dealt with. I mean, one in particular, and my colleagues will remember, he'd been hanging for weeks, and it should have haunted me for life. And it doesn't affect me at all. But then there are other little things, like the phones and the flout of the card. And on 7/7, I had to search it. I had to go in and search for secondary devices at Russell Square with a team of great people. And there's a girl on the outside who was in one piece. She was killed by the blast. And I had to search her, and that threw me. I had to search her. She had her clothes blown off. I'm going to grab a tissue.
Yeah, no,
she had her clothes blown off, and she was clearly dead. And I had to search her, and I feel to this day guilty as fuck about that. Guilty as fuck. I know other colleagues I've spoke to. We don't speak much because we're guys. We don't really speak about this, but colleagues have said they met that girl, particular girl, bless her, when they walk through, and they have similar feelings. And whilst I then went on to the carriage at Russell Square, 27 people died there, by the way. And I saw the people being treated and dying as well upstairs. They were cleared out of the carriage by the time I got there. It was awful. It was a horrific scene. But what really got me was searching a girl in one piece who was dead and naked, and that threw me. So those 2 things on that timeline were sort of pinged up, and that's where they realised that they were the memories that they needed to drill into and rationalise. And that takes a long time. And then you go through then rationalising all those processes. So CBT goes on. What I will say about CBT, and again, it's been described, it threw me back into it for a year, 2015. And a friend of mine who was I was in the Air Force with, and he became a traffic investigator for a police force down south. He said it was like a lottery ball machine. Your brain was like a lottery ball machine where the decisions didn't come out the bottom. And I was like that for a year. I was completely, my partner, she found me collapsed on the floor. I had a few drinks sometimes because that solves it. By the way, guys, drinks solves it. It's not the answer. Really not the answer. And I said during my talk, Hannah, if you remember, that one large whiskey calmed my amygdala down and I was not a problem. Unfortunately, that then leads on to other problems, so you can't rely on that. So that year of CBT was very, very interesting. I think it's turned my PTSD into just a general anxiety rather than the memories. I think the memories have now, we'll speak about the memories. So a lot of people, when they think of PTSD, think of Rambo lying awake screaming at night. That is certainly not the case that I've heard most people. Mine was a smell. So when I went down the tunnel 177, I could smell chemicals, acetone.
Oh, I had a very similar thing.
Did you?
I had a thing with smells, What? So because a lot of the people that, the viewers don't really know the background of what I've been through, but I was with escaping Afghanistan, you know about it. I was escaping Afghanistan and I was with the British troops when we tried to escape. And a lot of people had been there for days at a time. So days at a time with no toilets, nothing.
Right.
Yeah, so it was a different kind of smell, but it was...
Did you smell the explosion?
No, I couldn't smell. There was certain things that I had seen, and I thought that seeing things would be more in your brain and draw, but it was the smells, and I could smell it afterwards, and I kept telling my therapist that I can smell it still.
Yes.
I was like, I can still smell it. I can smell it on my clothes. I can smell it. And I used to wash my clothes a lot of times.
Can you pick it up now?
So sometimes I've noticed when I'm feeling quite low, and I don't know if this has anything to do with it, but when I'm feeling quite low, and I'm reminded of things like that, I feel like I can smell it again.
Okay,
so when I watched the documentary on Escaping from Kabul,
Yeah.
I remember feeling like I was there again.
Yeah.
That's how I knew that my emotions hadn't been processed yet. That was before therapy. But I haven't had it for about a year or two. So
Okay.
yeah. But yeah, so what
Smell is
it's very interesting. Yeah.
And so when I told Jo that, she said, well, that's part of the memory, you know. So for me, it was just the smell was part of the memory. My big issue was hyper-awareness.
Yeah.
Hyper-arousal, which they, you know, you hear a lot of emergency services like to sit in the right place. They go into a pub or a restaurant, they want to sit with their back to the wall and look out of the exits and entrances and look at everybody. I'm still like that to this day. That is very, very common. By the way, it's a superpower, because when you're walking down the road, you can almost sense things around you.
Yeah.
For me, it's one of the positive aspects of PTSD is the hyper-awareness.
Yeah.
But that was huge for me, and probably still today, huge for me.
Do you know what? There's something that you said in the lived experience session when you were explaining something, and it was the first time I had heard anyone else ever say this, and that's when I was like, oh my God, so this is something that's probably related to my PTSD. Was you said when you sit in a place you like to face, like where you can see the most things, right?
Yeah.
I've been doing that since then, but I didn't know it was because of that. It's something that I've done. I feel like I need to be aware of my surroundings. And I'm constantly looking left and right. My friend always used to say, like, you're studying, like, look at your laptop. But I'd be looking left and right every few seconds, checking my surroundings, scanning. It was something that was
Have you noticed that when you go into a place and there's one seat and it's the wrong seat, you know the wrong seat, people will straight away say something wrong with you.
My friend used to get so bothered because I'd be like, I need to sit that side.
Yeah.
I'd be like, I need to sit that side. She's like, Hannah, it's okay. I was like, no, I need to sit on that side. And I'm like, I'm so sorry, but I have to sit on the side where I can see the most things.
Otherwise, I get really grumpy. And people see a change in you, and I'll start like, honestly, people who don't know this would say, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with you?
Yeah. My friend used to say that to me all the time. And I remember after that, when you said that, I was like, oh my God. Because one of the things that I did when I knew I was, in the beginning when I felt like I was struggling, one of the things I actually didn't do was Google the symptoms. Now that is something I would say is quite it spirals sometimes when you Google symptoms and you think, and sometimes you fit yourself into the category where I do have that, and maybe you don't, maybe you do, but you do tend to do that.
Yeah, so it's cancer.
Yeah, literally. So I stay away whenever I feel like I'm ill or I'm feeling anything, whether it's physical illness, mental illness, whatever it is. I don't Google the symptoms, and I go to a doctor and I explain my symptoms, and they can do the work, because I feel like otherwise I'm swaying my opinion. And so I never really researched too much into PTSD before I had it. I only did it after the diagnosis.
Right.
And there was a lot of things that I learned after, and also through my EMDR, because I was in EMDR for 6 months.
It's quite good. It's weirdly good.
Yeah. And honestly, I mean, for me, I think as a psychology student, it was like a free lecture on PTSD for a few months. I learned so much about the topic, and it also made me go really deep into the topics. I was constantly looking at studies and stuff and what helps and what doesn't, and also differences in culture and how they experience PTSD as well. So it's very interesting.
You heard me explain this before, but I want to put it to you then.
Yeah.
Is I explain very badly, I think, that if I'm in an area, any busy area, which is my trigger, people or lots of traffic, I want to be through it. I want to be out the other end. So if my poor old partner, we're shopping and I don't want to be there, and she sees a pair of shoes that she doesn't want, why'd you do this? If you're listening, there's a pair of shoes, I don't really like them. Move on then. Go.
Yeah.
And if someone stands in my way, I want them out the way, and I'm constantly like that.
Yeah.
Even if what's weird is like you, I've been to places since, some very scary places. I'm in my element. But if I'm walking through the local market and it's busy, I've got these bloody feelings.
Yes.
And it's weird. So we have discussed this before, but for your listeners, if I would go back and do it in a heartbeat, because my mind is wired for that, but it isn't wired for normal life.
This is something that I remember speaking to you last time. It's such a weird feeling. Honestly, I don't know how to explain it to other people. There's certain things that I say, and I know I sound completely crazy to people when I say, like, it's not that I miss the trauma and the deaths and the abuse that I saw. Yeah. It's more so I don't know what it is. I think I miss the kind of person that it made me become. Yeah. I think I was very, there was a lot of adrenaline going through my body, but also I was helping people. I was,
your brain's wired for
yes. And now I've sort of feel like I remember there were certain things that I did afterwards that were really stupid. I would put myself in quite dangerous situations because I missed the adrenaline, I think. I think you sort of get hooked. And because my PTSD, it wasn't just one standalone event. It was about 2 weeks worth of trying to escape and then coming back and then trying to escape and coming back. And I think a part of me just became so used to that adrenaline. And there was a lot of stuff that also happened around that time. I had a whole stalker incident and also, so there was a lot of things that happened around that time. And I was on high alert and it made me quite, I think, I don't know. I feel like I was sort of like the best version of myself in the sense that that's the time when I lost 40 kilos. So I lost a lot of weight. I took on like a healthier lifestyle. Yeah. I was running all the time because I think a part of me was like, you need to learn how to run.
Well, you need to, but I think that's really helpful because you need to start working on yourself. Yeah. I got super, super fit when I was 44. Yeah. I'm a lot older than that now. But people who suffer, a lot of them go into fitness massively. Yes. And I think that's a great escape. I've got a bit older now, I don't, but I did. I was running half marathons. And
I think I didn't know it at the time because I didn't do a lot of weightlifting. I did that later on. In the beginning, it was a lot of running. And I didn't know at the time because I didn't do it to lose weight. I did it because it just felt good. Yeah. I loved the adrenaline that I got when I was running. Yeah. There was a certain high that you get when you run really fast. There's this high that you get. Yeah. And I think that was like, it was a close feeling to how I felt maybe then. I don't know. This is just me sort of hypothesizing in my head. But it is so bizarre. I think one of the things that I would say is experiences like what you've experienced and what I've experienced and, things where you're in quite a high intensity situation. It really does show you what your morals and your ethics and your principles are.
Oh, well, that's very nice.
Yeah. So I think a lot of people say that they are a certain thing, but when you really come down to it, and there's that moment where you need to be that thing that you always say you are. Are you really? Would you really? And I remember thinking to myself, like, I'm actually quite proud with how I handled it. Yeah. I forgave myself for certain things. It's a badge of honor. Yes, of course. Yeah. I forgave myself for certain things. I was like, I could have dealt with this better because there was some times where I was with quite high emotions. Yeah. But a lot of the time I was quite cool. I was protecting the people around me. Yeah. I was doing the best I could. Yeah. I remember I was telling you right before this that there was a situation when ISIS had come in. We were in the airport trying to escape with the British troops and the Taliban. And funny enough, it was so bizarre seeing the Taliban and the British troops working together because they were working against ISIS. Yeah. So they were working hand in hand. They were talking to each other and I saw it. And we had a guy, his name was Tim. To this day, we've been looking like we want to find Tim. He was the one who helped us out. And he was like liaising between us. And one of the things that I remember was there was a point when I saw the troops speaking and he came up and he said to the woman, he goes, if you see them on a motorbike, give them hell. And she was with like a machine gun sort of thing. And I knew that they were coming in. That's when I knew. So they had made everyone go into these containers. Yeah. So I stayed behind and I went to one of them and I said, do you need me to do anything? I'm happy to do anything. And that's when they took everyone into containers, but the troops came back and they found me and they said, do you want to come with us? So it was just me and the soldiers walking through and I had to sort of translate to everyone to stay in and don't open the door for anyone. Because obviously the ISIS could come in and pretend to say that you're so safe to come out, but it's not. Yeah. And I remember in that moment when I was walking with them, I felt so good. And I know that sounds really messed up, but I just felt so good that it was just, I was doing something. I couldn't just sit there and be helpless and just sort of, wait. Yeah. I was like, I need to actively be doing something. And I'm so happy that I was able to. But yeah, it's just quite weird looking back and seeing how much an experience like that can change you and change your perception of life.
And I will say, just going back to your initial bit, the doctor said to me, and she doesn't realise, but when I last saw my doctor, as I left the room, she said, you gave your all. And as I walked out of the room, I had tears coming down my face because I thought, that's it. I've done everything I could do over years and years and years, and I've given my all, and I lasted through it, and I hopefully stayed calm through it and did my best. And I'm very, very proud of that. So in a way, PTSD for me is a badge of honor.
Yes, I feel the same, I
don't like it. My partner, the long-suffering partner, will tell you differently if we're in town. You should speak to her because she sees a lot of it and it's not nice. But in some respects, it means you've done. Do you know what I mean? You should be proud of it. It's your medal. I'd be fantastic. What a story.
Yeah, I mean, what a story. I think that's another thing is with PTSD, I think when you were talking about the denial thing, I remember thinking with me, it was quite different. I thought everyone must be feeling this.
Right,
Like,
okay.
It wasn't denial that I don't have these symptoms. I was like, no, everyone, all my family are feeling it, but they weren't feeling it to the extent that I was. And I remember just thinking, okay, there was a lot more that you had to do and a lot more you had to keep private and a lot more things you had to keep secret.
Yeah.
That in itself was also quite a big burden on my shoulders.
Yeah.
And I remember even in therapy with EMDR, there was a moment where I absolutely broke down. And the thing with me is I cry, but I don't cry in public. I don't like crying in front of people.
Okay.
It's just something I felt since then. I sort of, I've been sort of desensitized to it. And in therapy, I remember thinking, I can't do this. I started feeling like I was going to throw up and I was feeling sick. And my therapist, like there were certain things that I still don't remember to this day. I've blanked out on it.
Yeah.
I can't for the life of me. And, there came a point where it was 6 months of therapy and there came a point she was like, it's okay if you can't remember. It's just, it's just part of it.
Yeah.
I couldn't, to this day, there's certain things that I just try to think about and it goes blank. And I think it was because of so much pressure that I felt and so much pain. EMDR is eye movement desensitization therapy. So what it basically does is you're sort of sitting down and the therapist sort of makes you tap, and it's to, there's a whole science behind it, and I don't want to say the wrong thing, but it's to sort of activate the brain, the regions in your brain that work with memories. And what you basically do is you work through therapy, you work through the memories that you felt, and I'm sure you must know about this, yeah. So it's quite a long-term therapy. It's not short-term. And you work with a therapist to go through those different things that you've experienced. And you're sort of talking about a safe place while you're explaining them. So you have a safe place, a safe person. But again, that's quite hard to think of a safe place and a safe person.
Am I right in saying PTSD is where you have these memories that you file away into a box, which I have done successfully with most of the things I've done, and some spill out. And EMDR is about putting them back away again. Yeah,
it's to sort of process them as not happening in the present moment, but it's in the past. Yeah. That is another thing. I think there's a really big difference between compartmentalizing and suppressing. That is something I learned with my journey. There's a huge difference between just putting things to the side and dealing with it, and suppressing and not wanting to deal with it.
Yeah.
And that's something that I was doing. But so what would you say is like the ultimate advice you'd give to someone if they feel like they were experiencing some of these symptoms?
Well, I wrote it down because I don't tend to remember a lot. So I made some notes and because I think it's really, really important that people understand that it's normal. It's a normal response to trauma. If you experience trauma, then there is a chance that you'll get it. It may not last. If you are in a job where you experience it 10, 15 times, you've almost certainly had symptoms. And it's a very normal thing to get. It's just anxiety, really. Most of the time it won't last. It may resolve itself. It may stay with you for a long time. And there are certain aspects that stay with me to this day. I would say, I read something the other day, emotional people see life as a tragedy. Thinking people see life as a comedy. I'm a very emotional person, but I try to put myself to understand. So please remember that. I would also say monitor yourself. So I was in denial for years. Apparently the average time for diagnosis is 10 years for PTSD. Wow. And I was 10 years. Yeah. So if you find yourself running out of patience with people, if you find yourself wanting to lock yourself away from people on your days off, if you find yourself getting really crappy with people, if you find yourself walking through that treacle of water, then these are possible signs. The other things I would say is I suffered from psoriasis, which I think is linked. I suffered from, I think it's called misophonia, where you don't like certain sounds. And digestion problems. I won't go any deeper, but if you have digestive, all those little things might be a little sign. So please just monitor yourselves. If you've been through trauma, the first 3 or 4 weeks is going to be hard and there's nothing that can be done because that's the way of your body. They don't even debrief now, do they, for 4 weeks?
I'm not too sure, as in therapy.
Yeah, they don't give you therapy they allow you 4 weeks. So the first 4 weeks might be difficult, but after that, if you find yourself then see someone. It's really difficult. And don't blame yourself. You gave your all, as the doctor said to me. You've done everything you can do, and it's normal.
Yes, I think that's something that I'd like to add to that. when I was first going through it, I was like, I didn't do enough. And now I've come to a point where I'm like, no, you gave it your all. And this is the best you could have done in that moment. Stop rehashing and thinking that I could have saved this person. I could have done this. I could have done that. You did what you could do. Yeah. And that's
and
the
I
most
heard
you could
some
do.
people say when I first started going through the journey, is some people come up with this sort of, you hear it in the military, pull yourself together, get a grip, and you think, shut up, how do you know? But then when you've been through the journey and you recognise that this is what happens, these are memories, unresolved memories, then you've got to take ownership of it and move on and live with those symptoms, I think, some of them, you know. And unfortunately for my partner, I'll still get crappy when she hangs around looking at shoes she doesn't want. That makes it comical, but it's an awful feeling. You feel like you want to be out of that situation. I want to be away, so it's going to happen when you're in the middle of a silly market. Yeah. You know?
And then just to sort of wrap up, considering the stigma around mental health and then specifically male mental health and then reaching out for help in regards to mental health, what is an advice you'd give in that sense?
Well, I think that part of my denial was that I was a guy and you're supposed to, you know... I know that within policing, a lot of my colleagues understood, but there were some who didn't. But a lot of them supported you. Remember that incident I told you about by the card and the flowers? People walked over me, hard men, patted me on the back and said, "Pete, you know, I know where you're coming from. So having an understanding, please don't hide away from it. Please seek help. Yeah. Don't let it fester in your head for 10 years and end up getting convicted of punching someone." I think.
Well, thank you so much for speaking today. It's been an absolutely, I mean, your story is so inspiring, and I'm so glad that you came today to speak and take time out of your busy day to, you know, make your way down to Brunel. I think that we'll sort of end up there. I think considering the topics we've discussed today and things, we will put some links down below for any resources that you might need, or if there's anything that you feel like you're feeling, we'll have some resources down in the links. Thank you so much for coming on today.
It's been a pleasure meeting you.
Thank you. Okay, so I did speak about this in the beginning of the episode, that this will be my last episode as me as a host. This podcast is still continuing on, but it'll be with a new team. I just wanted to actually take a moment to thank everyone who's sort of helped me in this journey. And also have been so kind and so generous with their time in terms of like just coming here, speaking to me for an hour, sometimes more. All the different staff members. I think there's a project that we have up on our YouTube channel and our Spotify where we did asking all the staff members what they did for their mental health. And it was so lovely to meet so many staff members across Brunel from different departments, different subjects. It was so interesting to see what they do to help with the mental well-being. So definitely check that out. First, a big thank you to all the guests, of course. Pete today, who came on and spoke about his story. It was very inspiring, but also all the other guests that I've had in the past. And then I want to take a moment to thank our editor. Now, obviously, this is it's an audio only, so you don't see the editor. You see him he's behind the scenes, but he's done so much for this podcast. He's been here from the start. He's been amazing, and I wish we had him on as a guest at some point, but it just never happened. So thank you to Valentin for being such an amazing editor. Thank you to Lorraine, who is our manager and who asked me to take on this role. It's been such an enriching experience for me, and I can't wait for the new team to take over. Also, a thank you to Alia. She's been my friend and sort of, you know, when I was making the briefs for all the podcasts, she was like, no, don't ask that question. You don't need to ask that question, or you don't need to do this. Don't do this, do that. And I needed that. So thank you so much, Alia. It's been, I know you're listening, so it's been incredibly helpful. And also, as this has turned into sort of a bigger thing, we were very fortunate to have Terry and Nana, who took this on and turned it into sort of an internship scheme for students, which you will meet. You'll meet all the new team. There will be 4 new members who are taking on from this podcast. This podcast did start to feel like a little bit like my baby. I feel like I was carrying it in my arms all the time. Like, what do I do with this? What do I do with this? And it's just been so amazing. I think something that I remember saying last time is graduation didn't feel like goodbye for me. It didn't feel like I was actually leaving Brunel because I was there the next week doing another episode. So it didn't really feel like goodbye at all. So it feels very strange because now I feel like this is actually goodbye. And like you guys have just heard in the episode, I had a lot of stuff going on when I was at Brunel. A lot of things that I had to deal with, and all the staff members have been so helpful. So I'm forever grateful to Brunel. And that's one of the reasons why I kind of stayed on for as long as I did. I'm not going to cry. That's so, but it is just very emotional. So yeah, thank you so much to all the listeners. That's another thing. All of the students who listened and sometimes gave the sweetest feedback. It's honestly, I don't really think, sometimes I speak into this mic and I don't realize that there are people listening. It just feels like I'm waffling on for about an hour. So when I get feedback from staff members sometimes who've told me that, you know, I spoke about a subject when it can be quite sensitive and they've told me that I dealt with it. I mean, for me, that's quite flattering. That's so amazing that you thought that. But honestly, I'm more grateful than anything. So yeah, thank you to everyone. And I can't wait to see how this goes with the new team. And congratulations to the new team. But yeah, thank you so much. And thank you for the final time.